Sierra Davis's hands trembled as she picked up the broken wine glasses from the floor, her knees stinging from where she'd hit the marble. The restaurant's opulent dining room had gone deathly silent. Every eye was on her, the clumsy black waitress who'd just been shoved to the ground by Richard Whitmore, one of Chicago's wealthiest real estate moguls. Pathetic, Whitmore sneered, adjusting his Rolex. Can't even walk straight. This is what Bellissimo hires now? Sierra bit her tongue, swallowing the humiliation that burned in her throat. She needed this job. Her mother's chemotherapy bills were crushing her, and her little brother Jordan depended on her completely. She couldn't afford to lose this position, no matter how much this man's cruelty stung. That's when the temperature in the room dropped. The entrance doors opened, and Sierra felt it before she saw it. A shift in the air, a collective holding of breath. She looked up from the floor, glass shards still in her trembling hands, and her eyes met the most intense gaze she'd ever encountered. Marco Ferretti had arrived, and from the lethal stillness in his expression as he surveyed the scene, someone was about to pay dearly for what just happened. This is how Sierra's entire world changed in one night. If you want to discover what happened when Chicago's most powerful mafia boss decided to seek justice for a woman he'd never met, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. Every view helps bring more stories like this one to life. Sierra had been working at Bellissimo for 3 months, and she'd learned to make herself invisible. The upscale Italian restaurant in Chicago's Gold Coast catered to the city's elite. Politicians, CEOs, old money families who treated people like her as furniture. She wore the humiliation like armor, each shift another brick in the wall she was building toward her mother's recovery. Tonight was supposed to be routine. Take orders, smile politely, endure the occasional condescending comment, collect tips, go home. She had another shift at the diner starting at midnight, then her weekend housekeeping job. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford, not when her mother's stage 3 breast cancer treatment cost more than Sierra made in 6 months. Table 12 needs their wine, Marco, the head waiter, had said. Whitmore party. Be careful. They're high maintenance. Sierra had nodded, balancing the expensive Barolo on her tray. She'd served the Whitmore table before. Richard Whitmore and his entourage of equally entitled friends who snapped their fingers at staff and complained about everything. But she'd handled worse. What she hadn't expected was Whitmore's hand shooting out as she approached, deliberately knocking her tray. The crash echoed through the restaurant. Wine splashed across the white marble floor like blood. The glasses shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces. "Watch where you're going," Whitmore had bellowed, though everyone had seen what he'd done. Sierra had immediately dropped to her knees, mortified, scrambling to clean the mess. "I'm so sorry, sir, That's when he'd pushed her. Not hard enough to seriously hurt, but enough to send her sprawling, her palms scraping against broken glass. "Disgusting," he'd said loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear. This is what happens when places lower their standards. The racist undertone wasn't even subtle. Sierra's face burned with shame and rage, but she kept her head down, kept cleaning. She couldn't react, couldn't defend herself, couldn't risk her job. Then Marco Ferretti walked in. Sierra had heard whispers about him. Everyone in Chicago had. The youngest don in the city's history, head of the Ferretti family at 32 after his father's death. Ruthless, brilliant, untouchable. Bellissimo was one of his legitimate businesses, a front for the empire that actually ran half the city's underground operations. She'd never seen him in person before. The photographs didn't do him justice. He was devastatingly handsome in a way that seemed almost dangerous. Sharp jawline, intense dark eyes, black hair perfectly styled. His tailored charcoal suit probably cost more than her entire year's salary. But it wasn't his appearance that made the room freeze. It was the aura of absolute power that radiated from him. The way every person in the restaurant instinctively understood they were in the presence of someone who could end them with a word. Marco's eyes swept the scene. Sierra on her knees in broken glass and wine, Whitmore standing over her with contempt, the other diners watching in uncomfortable silence. What happened here? His voice was quiet, controlled. Somehow, that made it more terrifying. The restaurant manager Giuseppe rushed forward, wringing his hands. "Mr. Ferretti, Just a small accident, nothing to... I wasn't asking you. Marco's gaze hadn't left Sierra. Stand up. Sierra's heart hammered as she rose on shaking legs, her palms bleeding slightly from the glass. She kept her eyes down, afraid to meet his stare directly. Look at me, he commanded softly. She did, and something electric passed between them in that moment. Recognition, though they'd never met. Understanding, though no words had been spoken. She saw something flicker in his dark eyes, something almost like recognition of a kindred spirit. Someone who understood what it meant to fight, to survive, to carry impossible weight. Tell me exactly what happened, he said. Sierra hesitated. If she told the truth, Whitmore would make sure she was fired. His family had connections, money, influence, but something in Marco Ferretti's expression told her that lying to him would be far more dangerous than telling the truth. I was bringing wine to table 12, she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. Mr. Whitmore knocked the tray from my hands. When I tried to clean it up, Xiaotu pushed me down. The silence that followed was deafening. Marco turned to Whitmore, who had gone slightly pale but was trying to maintain his arrogant posture. Is this true? Now listen here, Whitmore blustered. I don't know who you think you are, but... I know exactly who I am, Marco interrupted, his voice like silk over steel. The question is whether you know who you are. You're a man who just assaulted one of my employees in my establishment. Assaulted? Whitmore laughed nervously. Don't be dramatic. The girl's clumsy, that's all. These people... He didn't get to finish the sentence. Marco moved so fast, Sierra barely saw it. One moment he was standing 5 feet away. The next he had Whitmore by the throat, slamming him against the wall with enough force to rattle the expensive artwork hanging there. Choose your next words very carefully, Marco said, his voice deadly calm, because they might be your last. The entire restaurant held its breath. Sierra's pulse raced. She should have been terrified, but instead she felt something else entirely, a fierce, vindicating satisfaction. Someone was finally standing up for her. Someone was making this entitled monster understand there were consequences. Mr. Ferretti, Giuseppe pleaded, please, perhaps we should... Marco raised one hand without looking away from Whitmore, and Giuseppe fell silent instantly. The power dynamic was crystal clear. Marco Ferretti didn't just own this restaurant, he owned everyone in it. Apologize, Marco said to Whitmore. Now. I'm sorry, Whitmore choked out, his face red. Not to me. Marco released him slightly, just enough to let him breathe. To her. Whitmore's eyes darted to Sierra, hatred and humiliation warring in his expression. I apologize, he forced out. For what specifically? Marco pressed. For pushing you. And the tray. It was inappropriate. Marco released him completely, stepping back with the fluid grace of a predator. He straightened his cuffs, his expression never changing. You and your party are banned from every establishment I own in this city. That's 43 restaurants, 12 hotels and 8 clubs. Security will escort you out. As if summoned, 2 massive men in black suits appeared from nowhere. They took positions on either side of Whitmore and his shocked companions. You can't do this, Whitmore sputtered. Do you know who I am? My lawyers will... Your lawyers will do nothing, Marco said with finality. Because if you ever speak about this night, if you ever say one word against this woman or this establishment, you'll discover exactly how deep my influence runs in this city. Do we understand each other? The threat was clear. Whitmore nodded mutely and the security team escorted his entire party out. The other diners quickly returned to their meals, the incident already being mentally filed away as something they hadn't really witnessed. Marco turned back to Sierra, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. Come with me. It wasn't a request. Sierra followed him through the kitchen, where every chef and staff member immediately made way, and up a private staircase to an office she hadn't known existed. The room was elegant, masculine, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Chicago skyline. Sit, Marco said, gesturing to a leather chair. He moved to a cabinet and returned with a first aid kit. Your hands. Sierra looked down, having almost forgotten about the cuts. They're fine, really. I should get back to... Sit down! This time she obeyed, sinking into the chair. Marco pulled over another chair, sitting directly in front of her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made her head spin. He took her hands in his, and Sierra's breath caught. His hands were larger than hers, warm and surprisingly gentle as he turned her palms up to examine the cuts. The touch sent electricity through her entire body. "This will sting," he warned before applying antiseptic. True to his word, it burned, but Sierra didn't flinch. She'd endured worse pain. As he worked, cleaning and bandaging her hands with careful precision, Sierra studied him. Up close, he was even more striking. Dark lashes, strong nose, a small scar above his left eyebrow that somehow made him more attractive rather than less. But it was his hands she couldn't stop watching, hands that had just threatened a man with deadly calm, now touching her with incredible gentleness. "What's your name?" he asked without looking up. Sierra Davis." "How long have you worked here?" "Sierra Davis." 3 months. "And has anything like this happened before?" She hesitated. "Nothing this extreme, but customers can be demanding." His jaw tightened. "Demanding is one thing. What I saw downstairs was something else entirely." He finished with her hands but didn't release them. Instead, he looked up, meeting her eyes. "Why do you let them treat you this way?" The question surprised her. "I need this job. There are other jobs, not that pay like this one, not with tips like I get here." She pulled her hands back gently, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. "I have responsibilities. My mother has cancer. My little brother is only 15. I work 3 jobs to keep us afloat." Something flickered in Marco's expression. Understanding, maybe even respect. "And you do all this alone?" "My father left when I was 12. It's always been just us." Marco stood, walking to the window, his hands in his pockets. For a moment, he just stared out at the city, silent. Then he spoke without turning around. "You're fired from Bellissimo." Sierra's heart stopped. "What? But you just defended me, I thought." "You're fired as a waitress," he continued, finally turning to face her. "Because I'm hiring you as my personal assistant." She stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Your what?" "Assistant. The pay is $5,000 a week. Health insurance included. Full coverage for your entire family. Normal business hours, no night shifts. You'll manage my legitimate business appointments, handle correspondence, coordinate with my various enterprises." Sierra's mind reeled. 5,000 a week. That was more than she made in a month working 3 jobs. I don't understand. You don't know anything about me. I have no qualifications for—" "You work 3 jobs to support your family. You maintain dignity in the face of humiliation. You tell the truth, even when it might cost you everything." Marco moved closer, his dark eyes intense. "Those are the only qualifications I need. Everything else can be taught." "Why?" Sierra whispered. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Marco's expression was unreadable. "Because I saw something in your eyes downstairs. Strength, fire, loyalty. And because no one should have to endure what you just did to survive." He extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement?" Sierra looked at his outstretched hand, her mind racing. This was insane. Marco Ferretti was the head of the Mafia. Working for him meant entering a world she knew nothing about, a world of danger and darkness and moral ambiguity. But it also meant her mother could get the treatment she needed. It meant Jordan could focus on school instead of worrying about money. It meant she could sleep, eat, breathe for the first time in years. She took his hand. "We have an agreement." The smile that crossed Marco's face was small but genuine, transforming his features from intimidating to absolutely devastating. "Good. You start Monday. My driver will pick you up at 8. As Sierra left the office, her bandaged hands and racing heart, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just irrevocably changed. She'd entered Bellissimo tonight as a struggling waitress being ground down by the world. She was leaving as the personal assistant to the most dangerous man in Chicago. And somehow, impossibly, she felt safer than she had in years. Monday morning arrived with terrifying swiftness. Sierra stood outside her apartment building at exactly 7:55 a.m., wearing her best dress, which she was suddenly, painfully aware, wasn't nearly nice enough for wherever she was going. Her mother had insisted on doing her hair, twisting it into an elegant updo that made Sierra look more sophisticated than she felt. "You look beautiful, baby," her mother had said, her thin frame wrapped in the robe that had gotten too big on her. "This is your chance, don't be afraid of it." At precisely 8 o'clock, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up. The driver, a stern-looking man in his 50s, got out and opened the rear door without a word. Sierra slid into the leather interior, her heart pounding. The drive took them from her modest Southside neighborhood to downtown Chicago, pulling up to a glass skyscraper that gleamed in the morning sun. Ferretti Holdings, the brass plaque announced, the legitimate face of Marco's empire. Sierra's first day was overwhelming. Marco's previous assistant, an efficient woman named Teresa, spent 4 hours walking Sierra through systems, schedules, and protocols. Marco himself was in meetings all morning, visible only through the glass walls of the conference rooms, where he commanded attention with effortless authority. It wasn't until lunch that he called her into his office. "How was your morning?" he asked, not looking up from the documents he was signing. "Intense," Sierra admitted. "Teresa is thorough. She has to be. I don't tolerate mistakes." He set down his pen, finally meeting her eyes. "Your mother's first oncology appointment is tomorrow at Northwestern Memorial. I've arranged for Dr. Sarah Chen to oversee her treatment. She's the best in the Midwest." Sierra froze. "How did you? I never told you where. I had my people look into your situation." Marco said it like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Your mother will receive the best care available, all expenses covered under your benefits package. Your brother's school tuition is also handled. He'll attend Lincoln Park Academy starting next semester if he wants. Better education, better opportunities." Tears burned Sierra's eyes. She'd been fighting this battle alone for so long that having someone simply handle it felt surreal. "Mr. Ferretti, I don't know what to say." "Marco," he interrupted, "when we're alone, you call me Marco, and you don't need to say anything. You work for me now, I take care of what's mine." The possessiveness in that last statement should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with fear. Over the next 2 weeks, Sierra learned to navigate Marco's world. She discovered he was meticulous, demanding, and had zero patience for incompetence, but he was also fair. When she made a mistake scheduling a meeting, he simply had her fix it, showing her the correct protocol instead of berating her. When she stayed late to finish a project, he ordered dinner for both of them and worked alongside her. She also learned that Marco Ferretti was far more complex than the ruthless Mafia boss reputation suggested. He personally called to check on her mother's treatment progress. He remembered Jordan's name, asked about his grades. He noticed when Sierra was tired and sent her home early. He was protective in a way that felt both foreign and addictive. But the danger was always there, lurking beneath the surface. Sierra was working late on a Friday evening, the office empty except for the two of them, when Marco's phone rang. She watched his expression change, hardening into something cold and lethal. "When?" he asked, his voice deadly quiet. A pause. "Where is he now?" Another pause. "I'm on my way." He hung up and was on his feet immediately, grabbing his suit jacket. Then he paused, looking at Sierra with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Come with me," he said. "Where are we?" "No questions, just come." Sierra grabbed her coat and followed him to the private elevator. They descended to the underground parking garage where a different car waited. Armored, she realized with a jolt. 2 security guards materialized from the shadows. "Sir, this isn't safe," one of them said, eyeing Sierra. "You shouldn't bring—" "She stays with me," Marco said flatly. "Always." They drove through Chicago's streets, the city lights blurring past. Sierra's pulse raced, but Marco's hand found hers in the darkness of the back seat, his thumb stroking her knuckles in a gesture that was clearly meant to soothe. "Marco, what's happening?" she finally asked. "Someone tried to hurt something that belongs to me," he said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "I'm going to handle it." They pulled up to a warehouse in an industrial area Sierra had never been to. More men in suits waited outside. Marco turned to her before getting out. Stay in the car. Don't leave for any reason. If anything happens, Lorenzo will get you to safety. He nodded to the driver, who was built like a tank. Marco. He cupped her face with one hand, the gesture unexpectedly tender. Trust me, Sierra. I'll be back in 15 minutes, I promise. Then he was gone, disappearing into the warehouse with his men. Sierra sat in the dark car, her heart in her throat, listening to Lorenzo's steady breathing from the front seat. Minutes felt like hours. Then she heard it. Raised voices, a crash, a sound that might have been a gunshot. Her hands clenched in her lap. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to get away from this world of violence and darkness. But stronger than fear was something else, worry for Marco. The man who'd defended her against Whitmore, who'd given her mother a chance at survival, who'd somehow, in 2 short weeks, become someone she couldn't imagine losing. Exactly 15 minutes later, Marco emerged from the warehouse, straightening his cuffs. There was a small spatter of blood on his white shirt, but his expression was calm, almost serene. He slid back into the car like nothing had happened. Let's go home, he told Lorenzo. Sierra stared at him. What did you... Someone vandalized one of my restaurants, spray-painted threats on the walls. Marco's voice was conversational, but his eyes were hard. They won't do it again. Did you... kill them? No. He looked at her directly. I don't kill for vandalism, Sierra, but I make sure the message is clear. What's mine is protected. Always. The drive to her apartment was quiet. When they pulled up outside, Marco got out with her, walking her to the door despite her protests. You saw a side of my life tonight that I'd prefer you never had to see, he said in the dim hallway. If you want to quit, I'll understand. Your mother's treatment will continue regardless. You have my word. Sierra looked up at him, this dangerous, powerful man who'd shown her more kindness in 2 weeks than most people had in her entire life. She should be terrified. She should run. Instead, she said, I'm not quitting. Something blazed in Marco's eyes. Why not? Because you kept your promise. You said 15 minutes, and it was 15 minutes. She took a step closer to him. Because you've kept every promise you've made to me, and because I trust you. The air between them crackled with tension. Marco's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing her lower lip. You shouldn't, he said roughly. I'm not a good man, Sierra. Maybe not, she whispered, but you've been good to me. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. His eyes dropped to her lips, his body leaning closer. Then, with visible effort, he stepped back. Get some sleep, he said, his voice strained. I'll see you Monday. Sierra watched him walk away, her entire body trembling with adrenaline and something far more dangerous. Desire for a man who was completely, impossibly wrong for her, and yet felt more right than anything ever had. 3 weeks into working for Marco, Sierra's life had transformed beyond recognition. Her mother's cancer treatment was progressing well. Dr. Chen was optimistic about remission. Jordan had enrolled at Lincoln Park Academy and was thriving. Sierra had moved them to a better apartment in a safer neighborhood, courtesy of Marco insisting her living situation was unsuitable. But the biggest change was the feeling growing between her and Marco, something that crackled in every glance, every accidental touch, every late night working together. They hadn't crossed any lines. Marco maintained careful distance, professional even when they were alone. But Sierra saw the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. She felt the possessiveness in his protection, the tenderness beneath his gruff orders. It all came to a head on a Friday night. Marco had a charity gala, one of those glittering events where Chicago's elite gathered to write checks and see each other. Sierra had organized it, but wasn't planning to attend. You're coming, Marco had informed her that morning. I'm your assistant, not your date. You're coming, he repeated, in that tone that meant the discussion was over. Teresa will take you shopping this afternoon. Anything you want. That's how Sierra found herself in a designer boutique in the Gold Coast, trying on dresses that cost more than her old monthly rent. Teresa, who'd warmed to Sierra considerably, kept bringing out more options. Mr. Ferretti specified midnight blue, Teresa said, holding up a stunning gown. He said it would match your eyes. Sierra's breath caught. Marco had noticed her eyes. He'd thought about what color would complement them. The intimacy of that knowledge made her chest tight. The dress was perfect, elegant, sophisticated, with a neckline that was tasteful but undeniably beautiful on her. When Sierra looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. That evening, when Marco picked her up, the expression on his face made every moment of anxiety worth it. He stared at her like she was the only woman in the world, his dark eyes traveling over her with an intensity that made her skin flush. "Sierra," he said roughly. "You're too much?" she asked nervously. "Perfect. You're absolutely perfect." The gala was overwhelming. Hundreds of people in evening wear, champagne flowing, an orchestra playing. Sierra felt out of place despite her beautiful dress, acutely aware she didn't belong in this world of old money and social pedigree. But Marco never left her side. His hand rested possessively on her lower back as he introduced her to various contacts. He deflected intrusive questions about their relationship with smooth authority. He made her feel like she belonged there, at his side, until Richard Whitmore showed up. Sierra saw him across the ballroom and froze. Marco felt her tense immediately. "What's wrong?" he murmured. Before she could answer, Whitmore was approaching, a woman Sierra vaguely recognized as a socialite on his arm. His smile was venomous. "Ferretti," he said with false warmth. "Fancy seeing you here. And your assistant, is it?" His eyes raked over Sierra with undisguised contempt. "Moving up in the world, I see, though I suppose when you work on your back." He didn't finish the sentence. Marco moved with lethal speed, grabbing Whitmore by the throat and slamming him against the nearest pillar. The ballroom went silent. Every eye turned to them. "Finish that sentence," Marco said, his voice deadly quiet. "I dare you." Whitmore struggled, his face reddening. The woman on his arm gasped. Security started moving toward them, but Marco's own men intercepted them smoothly. "Marco, don't," Sierra said urgently, touching his arm. "He's not worth it." For a moment, Marco didn't move. Then, slowly, he released Whitmore, who slumped against the pillar, coughing. "This is your final warning," Marco said, loudly enough for the entire room to hear. "Speak about her again, look at her again, exist in the same space as her again, and I will end you. Not financially, not socially. Permanently, do you understand?" Whitmore nodded frantically. Marco turned away from him dismissively, taking Sierra's hand. "We're leaving," he announced to the room at large, his tone brooking no argument. He led Sierra out of the gala, past hundreds of stunned guests, into the cool Chicago night. His driver pulled up immediately. They drove in tense silence until Marco finally spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, staring out the window. "I shouldn't have lost control like that." "You were defending me," Sierra said softly. "I was. But I also just publicly claimed you in front of every influential person in Chicago." He turned to look at her, his expression intense. "Do you understand what that means? Everyone in that room now thinks you're mine. They'll treat you accordingly, with respect, with fear, but also with curiosity and judgment. I've painted a target on your back." "I don't care," Sierra said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "You should care. My world is dangerous, Sierra. My enemies will see you as a weakness now, something they can use against me." "Then protect me," she said simply. "Like you've been doing all along." Marco stared at her for a long moment. Then, with a sound that was almost a groan, he pulled her into his arms. His lips crashed against hers in a kiss that was hungry, desperate, claiming. Sierra melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, kissing him back with all the pent-up longing of the past month. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco pressed his forehead to hers. "I told myself I wouldn't do this," he said roughly. "Told myself you deserved better than a man like me." "I choose you," Sierra whispered. "I choose this. All of it. Even knowing what I am, what I do. Even knowing." She cupped his face in her hands. "You're not just the head of the Mafia, Marco. You're the man who defended a waitress he didn't know. Who takes care of my family like they're your own. Who keeps every promise, no matter how small." Marco kissed her again, softer this time, tender. "Then you're mine," he said against her lips. "Completely mine. And I protect what's mine with everything I have." Always yours, Sierra agreed. The car pulled up to her apartment, but Marco didn't let her go. Instead, he spoke to the driver. "Take us home, Mold," he said. "Marco," Sierra started. "Not for that," he assured her, reading her thoughts. "Not yet. But I want you close tonight. Want to know you're safe. Will you stay with me?" Sierra nodded, and they drove to Marco's penthouse in the heart of downtown, a space as beautiful and controlled as the man himself. He gave her one of his shirts to sleep in, showed her to the guest room, but an hour later, unable to sleep, she found him on the balcony looking out over the city. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, joining him. Marco pulled her against his side, wrapping his arms around her. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights twinkle below. "My father used to tell me that in our world, love is a weakness," Marco said quietly. "That attachment makes you vulnerable, gives your enemies ammunition." "Do you believe that?" Sierra asked. "I used to." He turned her to face him. "But then, you walked into my restaurant and everything changed. You make me want to be better, stronger, not for power but for you." Sierra's eyes filled with tears. "I love you," she whispered. Marco's breath caught. Then he kissed her with a reverence that made her feel cherished, treasured, worshipped. "I love you too," he said against her lips. "More than I knew I was capable of loving anyone." They stayed on the balcony until dawn, wrapped in each other, neither willing to break the perfect peace of the moment, because both of them knew, without saying it, that in Marco's world, peace never lasted long. The next 2 months were the happiest of Sierra's life. She and Marco navigated their relationship with careful joy, public enough that his world knew she was under his protection, private enough to cherish the intimate moments between them. Her mother went into remission. Jordan excelled at his new school. Sierra discovered she had a real talent for Marco's business operations, earning respect from his legitimate associates, but the shadow was always there, waiting. It came on a Tuesday afternoon. Sierra was in Marco's office reviewing contracts when his head of security, Antonio, burst in without knocking. "Sir, we have a problem." Marco looked up sharply. "Speak." "The Russo family. They've made a move." Antonio's eyes flicked to Sierra. "Maybe we should discuss this privately." "She stays," Marco said firmly. "What move?" Antonio handed over a phone showing a photo that made Sierra's blood run cold. It was Jordan, leaving his school, completely unaware of the black SUV following him. "They haven't touched him," Antonio said quickly. "Just watching, but the message is clear." Marco's expression went absolutely deadly. "How long has this been happening?" "We caught it this morning. Could have started earlier." Sierra stood on shaking legs. "Jordan, my brother, they're targeting him because of me." "They're targeting him because of me," Marco corrected, his voice tight with fury. "The Russos have been looking for leverage. They think they've found it." He was already moving, grabbing his phone, issuing rapid-fire orders. "Double security on Sierra's entire family. Immediate extraction of the boy to the safe house. I want every Russo operation in this city shut down by midnight." "Marco," Sierra said urgently, "what if they hurt him? What if—" He took her face in his hands. "Breathe, Amore. I will not let anything happen to Jordan. You have my word." "Your word might not be enough." The fear came out as anger. "This is why I shouldn't have gotten involved with you. This is what you meant about painting a target on my back." "Yes," Marco said bluntly. "This is exactly what I meant. And I also meant that I would die before I let anything happen to you or anyone you love." Within an hour, Jordan was safely in one of Marco's secure properties, a luxury apartment with 24/7 protection. Sierra's mother was there too, confused but safe. Sierra wanted to go to them, but Marco refused. "You stay with me," he said. "If they're watching Jordan, they're definitely watching you. I'm not giving them any opportunity." That night, Sierra saw a side of Marco she'd only glimpsed before. He was in his element, commanding his empire with ruthless efficiency. Phone calls were made in rapid Italian. Men came and went from his penthouse office. Somewhere in the city, Marco's forces were moving against the Russos. Sierra should have been horrified. Instead, she was fascinated and grateful. This dangerous, powerful man was using every resource he had to protect her family. At 2 a.m., Marco finally came to bed, sliding under the covers where Sierra had been pretending to sleep. She turned to him immediately. "Is Jordan safe?" "Yes, the Russos got the message. Their operations have been disrupted. They won't move against your family again." "What did you do? What was necessary?" Marco pulled her close. "I warned you my world was dangerous." "I know." Sierra traced the line of his jaw. "But you're also my world now. I can't imagine being anywhere else." "Even when it puts your family at risk?" "My family is safer with your protection than they ever were without it." She kissed him softly. "I trust you, Marco, completely." But the universe wasn't done testing them yet. 3 days later, Sierra was leaving Marco's office building after a late meeting when it happened. She was walking to where Lorenzo waited with the car when someone grabbed her from behind, a hand clamping over her mouth. She tried to scream, to fight, but something sharp pricked her neck. The world went fuzzy. The last thing she heard was Lorenzo shouting, the sound of gunfire, and then nothing. She woke in a concrete room with no windows, her head pounding. Her wrists were zip-tied to a chair. Panic clawed at her throat, but she forced it down, trying to think clearly. The door opened. A man she didn't recognize entered, tall, lean, with cold eyes. "Miss Davis," he said in accented English, "welcome. I apologize for the accommodations." "Who are you?" Sierra demanded, proud that her voice didn't shake. "My name doesn't matter. What matters is that you're valuable to Marco Ferretti. Very valuable." He circled her slowly. "The Russo family sends their regards." "Marco will kill you for this," Sierra said with absolute certainty. The man laughed. "He'll try, but first he'll have to find you, and by then—" He leaned close. "By then, you'll have told us everything about his operations, his weaknesses, his safe houses, one way or another." "I'll tell you nothing." "We'll see." He nodded to someone Sierra couldn't see. "Start with something mild. We have time." The pain started small, a shock that made her muscles seize. Sierra bit her tongue to keep from screaming. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction. But as hours passed, as the pain escalated, she started to break. Not her loyalty, never that, but her hope. Maybe Marco wouldn't find her. Maybe this time the danger would win. Then, through the haze of pain and exhaustion, she heard it. Chaos outside the room. Gunfire, shouting, screams. The door exploded inward. Marco stood in the wreckage, gun in hand, his expression absolutely lethal. Behind him, his men were clearing the building with brutal efficiency. "Sierra," he breathed, and the relief in his voice cracked something in her chest. He was at her side in seconds, cutting her restraints, gathering her into his arms. "I've got you, amore. You're safe. I've got you." Sierra clung to him, shaking. "Marco, don't talk. Just hold on to me." He lifted her like she weighed nothing, carrying her out of that nightmare. The last thing Sierra saw before they left was the man who tortured her, on his knees, surrounded by Marco's men. Marco paused, looked back at him with eyes like death. "Make it slow," he said quietly. Then they were gone, speeding through Chicago's streets towards safety. Sierra spent 2 days recovering in Marco's penthouse under the care of a private doctor. Physically, she would heal. Bruises, shock, nothing permanent. But emotionally, the kidnapping had shaken something loose in both of them. On the 3rd day, Sierra found Marco on the balcony again, staring at the city. She wrapped her arms around him from behind. "I can feel you pulling away," she said quietly. Marco was silent for a long moment. "I almost lost you. But you didn't. You saved me. This time." He turned to face her, and she saw anguish in his eyes. "What about next time? What about the time after that? My enemies will always come after you, Sierra. As long as you're with me, you'll be in danger." "So what are you saying?" she asked, dread building in her chest. "I'm saying," Marco's jaw worked, "I'm saying I love you too much to keep putting you through this. You deserve a normal life, safety, peace." "No," Sierra said firmly. "Absolutely not. You don't get to decide this for me." "Sierra." "No." She grabbed his face, making him look at her. Yes, your world is dangerous. Yes, I was kidnapped and hurt. But I'm still here. I'm still choosing you. Don't push me away because you're scared. I'm not scared. You are. You're terrified that loving me makes you weak. But it doesn't, Marco. It makes you stronger. Makes both of us stronger. Tears streamed down her face. Please don't give up on us. Marco closed his eyes, his hands coming up to cover hers. I can't lose you. I wouldn't survive it. Then don't lose me. Keep me. Marry me. Make me yours in every way that matters. His eyes flew open. What? Marry me, Sierra repeated. In your world, in mine, in every way. Make me family, not just girlfriend. Give me your protection, your name, everything. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to trust that I can handle your world, that I'm strong enough to stand beside you, not behind you. That together we're unstoppable. Marco stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face, genuine, warm, transforming. You're insane. Probably, Sierra agreed. Is that a yes? Instead of answering, Marco dropped to one knee. Right there on the balcony with the Chicago skyline as their witness, he took her hand. Sierra Davis, you are the strongest, bravest, most extraordinary woman I've ever known. You walked into my life when I'd forgotten how to feel anything but power and control. You reminded me what it means to care, to hope, to love. His voice roughened with emotion. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my everything? Yes, Sierra sobbed, pulling him to his feet and kissing him through her tears. Yes, yes, yes. The wedding was small, just Sierra's family, Marco's inner circle, in the garden of his private estate. Sierra wore a dress the color of champagne, simple and elegant. Marco wore a tailored black suit, his eyes never leaving his bride. When they exchanged vows, Sierra's mother cried. Jordan stood proud as one of Marco's groomsmen, and when the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Marco kissed Sierra like she was his entire world, because she was. But the day's surprises weren't over. At the reception, Antonio approached Marco, whispering urgently. Marco's expression hardened. He turned to Sierra. The Russo family patriarch wants to meet. Alone. Absolutely not, Sierra said immediately. It's at a neutral location, under truce terms. I don't care. After what they did, this could end the conflict permanently, Marco said. It's worth hearing him out. Sierra grabbed his hand. Then I'm coming with you. Sierra, I'm your wife now, partners, remember? We face everything together. Marco studied her, then nodded slowly. Together. They drove to a restaurant in Little Italy, neutral territory. Paolo Russo was waiting, an older man with intelligent eyes. He stood when they entered, hands visible, respectful. Mr. and Mrs. Ferretti, he said, thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes, Marco said flatly. I come to offer peace and an apology. Paolo looked at Sierra. What my nephew did to you was unconscionable. He acted without my knowledge or approval. He has been handled. Handled how? Sierra asked. He no longer poses a threat to anyone. Paolo's meaning was clear. I'm an old man, Mrs. Ferretti. I've been in this business for 40 years. I know when a war is unwinnable. Your husband has the city, the loyalty, the power. I'm not interested in dying to prove a point. Marco's expression remained cold. What do you want? Peace, a formal treaty. The Russo family will operate only in our agreed territories. We will not target your interests or your family. In exchange, you allow us to maintain our existing operations without interference. And if I refuse, Marco asked, then we continue this war and many more people die, including, eventually, me, but also possibly more people you love. Paolo looked at Sierra meaningfully. I'm offering you what every man in our position wants, the ability to protect what matters most. Take the peace, Ferretti. Build your empire. Raise your family. Let old grudges die with old men like me. Marco was silent for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. Agreed. But understand this. If anyone in your organization, now or ever, comes after my wife or her family, the treaty is void. and I will burn everything you've built to the ground." "Understood," Paolo said, shaking Marco's hand. "You have my word." As they left, Sierra leaned against Marco in the car. "Do you trust him?" "No," Marco said honestly, "but I trust my ability to end him if he breaks the treaty. And more importantly," he pulled her into his lap, "I trust that you were right. Being with you doesn't make me weak. It gives me something worth protecting, worth building for. You make me want to be more than just the most feared man in Chicago. You make me want to be the best man I can be." Sierra kissed him softly. "You already are. You just needed someone to remind you." 2 years later, Sierra stood in the nursery of their suburban estate, watching Marco rock their 6-month-old daughter Isabella to sleep. The man who commanded Chicago's underworld with ruthless efficiency was completely undone by this tiny person, singing her Italian lullabies in a voice rough with tenderness. Her mother was cancer-free, living in the guest house with her own garden. Jordan was thriving at Northwestern, studying business, though he'd made it clear he wanted nothing to do with the family's less legitimate operations. Marco respected that, supported it even. Sierra herself had become an integral part of Marco's empire, managing the legitimate businesses with skill that surprised even her. She'd discovered a talent for negotiation, for seeing solutions others missed. Marco's associates had learned to respect her, not just as the boss's wife, but as a power in her own right. "She's asleep," Marco whispered, carefully placing Isabella in her crib. He turned to Sierra, pulling her into his arms. "Have I told you today that you're incredible?" "Not in the last hour," Sierra teased. "Unacceptable. You're incredible, amazing. The best decision I ever made." "I thought I decided," Sierra reminded him. "I'm the one who proposed, remember?" "Best decision I ever made was letting you," Marco amended, kissing her thoroughly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not running that first night. For choosing me when you should have run. For making me believe that monsters can have happy endings too." Sierra cupped his face, looking into the eyes of the man who'd changed her entire world. "You're not a monster, Marco. You're a man who does what's necessary to protect the people he loves. And I love you. Always will." "Always," Marco agreed, kissing her again. "My fierce, beautiful Sierra, my everything." Outside, Chicago glittered in the distance, a city that still feared Marco Ferretti's name. But here, in this moment, in this home they'd built together, he was just a man who loved his wife and daughter more than power, more than empire, more than anything else in the world. And that, Sierra thought as she held her husband close, was the greatest victory of all. Sierra's story began with humiliation and ended with a love that conquered fear, danger, and every obstacle in its path. If this story touched your heart, leave your like and share it with someone who loves intense emotional stories. More stories are coming soon. Until next time.